Welcome to the Father on Purpose podcast, featuring author and ministry leader Kent Evans and business executive and military veteran Lawson Brown. This is a show for you, Dad. You want to be a godly and intentional father. Unfortunately, you've turned to these two knuckleheads for help. Let us know how that works out for you. Before we begin, remember this: you are not a father on accident, so go be a father on purpose. Please welcome your hosts, Kent and Lawson.
Welcome to the podcast, men. Dads, one of the things that we are going to cover in the podcast are different challenges that dads have told us that they have. And it's through a lot of our survey work we've done with online and so forth, where we've asked this question: what is the single greatest challenge you have as a father? And Lawson, I hear all the time, I hear the word time. It comes in all kinds of flavors. You know, I don't have enough time. I got to wear so many hats. I don't know how to allocate my time. I feel like I'm running out of time. I feel like time. We hear it all of the time. And part of it is just, it's just true. Like, I mean, you know, we don't have a lot of time every day to do all the things we want to do. My passion and energy and imagination definitely outstrip the amount of time I have to do all the things that I'd want to do. You know, I'm confident I'll probably die with some things still on my bucket list, because I can make that list faster than I can earn money to go do them all. But I think there's hope here, but we've got to address this monster for dads. That's the time beast. And I have a few ideas, some of which might be a little bit, what's the right word, Lawson? Challenging.
There you go. I wondered what you were going to land on. You know, 350, I mean, not that it matters. I like numbers. Out of 2,800 respondents, 300 and almost 50 said time was their challenge. To answer that question, time is like, we all have the same amount. I've heard you say before, you know, Albert Einstein had 24 hours. There's other ways to put it. I've thought about it before. Same with working out. You know, like, I know that if I wake up early enough and go get in 30 minutes, I'm going to feel better. But what I tell myself is, gosh, I'm so busy. I just don't think that this week or tomorrow I'm going to have time for it. You know, it's like, what do you prioritize? And that's hard, so hard. And when you're especially smaller children or growing family, you know, it's just, God, you just are tired. It is a lot of work. You've got things that, you know, you used to maybe enjoy doing a lot of, golf or jogging or training or fishing or whatever it is. And you've got to think like, okay, I'm in a different part of life right now, and it's not going to be this way forever. How do I make more time for things that I know God wants me to prioritize? And it's not you, Kent, from the ministry standpoint, saying with your finger pointed, you should spend more time on your children. It's what everybody's asking. It's what 350 people said. I wish I could handle better.
Yeah. Well, and the interesting thing about it is, and this may sound just a little bit kind of blunt, but we all know if you've ever been diagnosed with an illness, I hope you haven't been diagnosed with something super life-threatening, but if you get diagnosed with an illness, you go find time for the cure. Right. So if you don't even have it in your calendar,
Right.
But man, if you're diagnosed with that illness, again, to put it really bluntly, if you, sadly, I mean, if you get diagnosed with some form of cancer, you find time for chemo. You find it. You don't have it, so to speak, but you do find it. And the reason is because we end up finding time for the things that either we prioritize ourselves, you know, it may be working out or, you know, balancing the budget or whatever, or life situations prioritize for us. Maybe a better example would be if your pipes burst in your basement, all of a sudden you got time to do some plumbing work because you have to. You don't really have a choice. You call some professionals, I guess, but that's the challenge is when the pipes burst or when you have a medical problem, you can outsource some of that time to professionals.
Yes. Like, don't wait on a crisis. There are ways to do this.
Exactly. But when your kids need you, you really can't outsource that. Like I can't, you know, today, this very day, when we're recording this podcast, earlier today, I had a gentleman here who I'd hired through a web service come and dig a 4-foot hole in my backyard so we could put in a new basketball goal. It took him about 2 hours. And I don't feel 1 ounce of shame that
Right.
I went and spent $70 to have him come
Right.
do that. Because you know what I needed to do? This podcast. And so
Right.
today, the 2 hours you and I will spend doing podcast episodes, I could have either done that or I could have spent the money and had someone dig the hole and do the, for me. Now, there have been times in my life,
It would have taken you longer than him. It would have taken you a lot longer than 2 hours.
Oh,
Whoever
my
that guy
goodness.
was that got it done
Oh,
in
my
2
goodness.
hours, it would take you 3
Absolutely.
times.
Number one, it saved me time. But number two, but here's what I also know. I don't want a dad to hear this and go, well, yeah, if you got money, you just buy time. Well, kinda. And there have been a lot of times in my life when I didn't have that $70. And that's when I did the toilet repair myself at my house. That's when I did put in my own tile bathroom floor because I didn't have, the several $100 to hire someone to do it. So I do understand the fact that there's going to be dads listening to this who go, well, yeah, sure. If I had unlimited money, I'd just buy myself a bunch of time back. So I don't want to hear it wrong. But what I have figured out, really, when dads are saying they don't have enough time, one of the things they're also saying at the same time they're saying that is they are a bit jumbled or still figuring out their priorities. I'm going to give you a specific example, Lawson, and I want you to react to it. One of the survey responses that we got back from our thousands of dad respondents was from a guy who described his cycling hobby. Oddly, like to answer the question, what's your single greatest challenge as a father? He typed in how much of an avid cyclist he was. And he made a couple of sentences about that. I thought, well, that's an odd response. And then he went on to say, therefore, I don't have enough time to be an engaged dad. And I kind of thought, should I call him? Should I just call him and go, hey, man, I'm not like Nostradamus here, but I think I found you a couple hours a day. So react to that because look, one of the things you guys are going to learn about this podcast is you look at the characters in The Wizard of Oz, right? And they all needed something. The lion needed courage. The scarecrow needed a brain. The Tin Man needed a heart. And I'm not going to deny sometimes I can come across like the Tin Man. I need a heart. I need a heart. But I do want to tell some dads, man, they might need to take their hobbies or hobby and sit it on the shelf for a year or 5 or 10 while their kids are young. Like, can I say that on this podcast, Lawson, or am I going to get us in a bunch of trouble?
No, I mean, it's yours.
This is my show. This is my show.
You said it. And by the way, it's too late. But listen, here's my reaction. I think that is a very cut and dry, black and white, practical example. 2 hours a day on a bicycle or 2 hours in your backyard digging a hole. I don't think most people, when they answer that question, have something so specific in their mind. I think it's more sort of an unorganized, it's a bit of a, I don't want to say it's a feeling, like we just feel so busy because everybody's so busy. I mean, that's a fact, but it is not hey, that guy was at least being, first of all, he's being honest. Maybe he had a blind spot, but most of it is probably more like, I just don't know. It probably goes with, one of the, I think it was the third or fourth one saying, I just don't know where to start. I don't know how to start. I don't know what to do. And so, yeah, balancing priorities, time management. Some people are better at it than others. Some people are overthink it and they're like forcing time on their kids in a certain way or on their wife in some specific way because they got some idea about something or whatever. I guess what I'm saying is if it were me and I had this happen, and thankfully I was able to get into a men's group early enough on in my faith walk to have some guys that have been way farther down the road than me and could speak maybe like the Tin Man, like, yeah, well, maybe if you didn't fly for your job every single week for 3 and 4 days, can you not turn that down any? There's places in your life you can find time. It's a matter of putting your energy into it. And, I think having some people in your life who can help you be that person that says, I think that's a little out of balance. If you're rolling down the road and you've got a a tire that's about to come loose and somebody behind you notices it, you want them to pull up beside you and go, "Hey, dude, I think your right tire is." Same thing. You want some people, probably guys, definitely your wife, who you can ask. You got to ask and be open-minded and open-hearted to say, "How do you think I'm doing?"
Well, man, you've hit on something really interesting. It's one thing. I had a friend, Trey, who used to say there's two kinds of people in the world. One kind of person stands out in his front yard and says, "Hey, my house is on fire. Will you help me put it out?" And he goes, I'll help that guy all day. I'll die trying to help that guy. There's a second person who stands out in his front yard and says, "Look, my house is burning down. Will you stand here and let me gripe and watch it burn?" And
right.
Trey goes, "No, man, I ain't up for that."
Right.
And I think, to your point, if we're honestly seeking the resolution to the problem, and we say something like, "Man, I just don't feel like I have enough time," would you look at my calendar and tell me what you think? Wow, that's a whole different attitude than, "I don't have enough time, and don't you dare tell me how to find any." Whoa. Well, then you really, it's like Jesus used to always ask people, "Do you want to be well? Do you want to be well?" And I think for those of us who have the time challenge, which is most of us, do you want it to be different? And if you do, we're going to end up talking more about, because here's what we can't do. Here's what you and I and all the engineers and all the scientists and all the smart people in the world, none of us can change the pace at which time moves. We cannot manufacture time. We cannot manufacture time. All we can manufacture is what we do with it. The conversation about time ends up being this smokescreen for priorities.
And most likely, probably not intentionally. They're not trying to throw smoke in the room. They feel themselves in a smoke-filled room that they can't figure their way out of. And that's, but God, time is so important. When I lost my job, this is, 18, 20 years ago, babies were young. And then again, during the pandemic, it was like those two periods of times were opportunities for stress to be created and a forced pause in time sort of there, where in both of those situations, 18 years apart, my wife and I and our two girls were just together more than ever. And I remember those way more than I remember any sweet spot in my career.
Wow, that's a great point. Yeah, I remember working for a company at one point where I had finally hit a job where, I was making pretty good money. Like, I don't want to deny the fact that it was a good paying gig for sure. And I was traveling, had a big expense budget, all that, and to some nice places. I wasn't traveling to, oh man, I almost just said a city name right then. And boy, I was going to, okay.
Just say some city.
Some city that rhymes with, no, I'm just kidding. Don't even do it. We can't even do the, but I remember traveling, and it was just some nice places. I was traveling, Paris, London, fun places. But I remember distinctly realizing I'd finally hit a spot in my career where I aggressively did not want my boss's job. Like every job I'd had before, I wanted the next one and the next one and the next one.
Right.
And
yep.
Finally, I hit a spot where I looked at my boss. His name was Alexi, great guy, French guy, super good dude. I loved working for him. And I remember thinking, if he moves in the company, like gets a different job, and they offer me his job, I'm quitting immediately. Like there's no way. Literally 90 or 95% travel. 90 or 95. Now I know some guys, they're in that job right now. They're listening to this podcast on an airplane. They're listening to this podcast on their iPhone in a city where they feel like they are lonely, they're away from their family, and they're sad, and they feel trapped. And I'm not saying just hand in your 2 weeks notice and wreck your finances and go live in a van down by the river so you can get all your time back. What I am saying is maybe it's time to think about a 1 or 2 year transition or 6-month transition so that you can buy back some of your time. And that's what we'll talk about, Lawson, on the other side of this really short break. Hey, Dad, sometimes being a dad can seem like a very difficult journey for which you and I are ill-equipped and we need gear on this journey. So we built a 7-part framework and we call it Survival Gear, the 7 must-have tools every dad needs for his journey. We took these tools, we wrapped them all into an ebook, and that ebook is entirely free. You can download this free ebook at manhoodjourney.org/survival-gear. That's /survival-gear, manhoodjourney.org. Come snag this free ebook and get equipped for your fatherhood journey. So Lawson, as we talked about before we took the break, there are some guys who, to your point, like the smoke-filled room metaphor, they just feel kind of trapped or stuck. They want to buy back some time. They're not just, chasing a hobby 3 hours a day. They're picking it up, laying it down at work. They're getting maybe promoted. What are a couple things that we could share with that busy professional guy for ways that he could redeem some of the time? And I'll go first and then you chime in. One of the ways is guys have asked me, hey, do I have to give up all my hobbies? And not just say maybe, right? Maybe. So as an example, I was a good golfer back in the day. Now for a couple reasons. One, I had more time and no kids yet. And I also was in a sales role where I had an expense report and my golf membership at the club was paid for by my company. So taking customers was actually encouraged. So that's the greatest accelerant for your golf game, right? Is somebody else pays for it and they give you time off to go do it. So I got down to where I was a 8 or 9, 10 handicapper. I'd shoot low 80s anywhere on earth. I'd go. I was a good golfer. And then we started having kids. Fast forward about 20 years, plus or minus. The last time I played golf was last year at the request of a board member friend of mine. And we were taking out a ministry friend of ours. And so it was a great event. We had a blast, great relational time. We were at a ritzy golf club, ritzy, members only, high ticket golf club that he was paying for. And by the 6th hole, one of the soles of my golf shoes came completely detached from the leather golf shoe. And I don't know if you know much about golf, but they have cleats in them.
Right. Is that not part of it?
Yeah. Well, that's the whole thing. They have little cleats in the bottom of the shoe so you can have grip. Well, when you're standing on just a strap of leather like Pocahontas, you basically got this moccasin on now. It doesn't work as well. By the 13th or 14th hole, the other shoe, I literally finished the day wearing leather golf shoe-like moccasins with 2 shoe bottoms, complete shoe bottoms in the caddy's golf cart at this high-ticket golf club. All that to say, the reason was they basically dry rotted because that's how infrequently.
What a great dad I am. Look at my shoes. You see what my priorities have been?
I mean, dude, it was both thrilling and validating and embarrassing all at the same time. Right. But I want to encourage guys. In this way and say, yeah, you might have to give up some hobbies. But you know what else we could do? Depending on the hobbies, we can bring our kids, especially as they get older. If you like to go shoot clay pigeons, man, once your kid's 9 or 10, go get him a cheap shotgun and take him out shooting clay pigeons with you. Spend some time together. If you like fishing, take your kids fishing. If you like to go throw football in the yard with your kids. There are some things we can do that are hobby centric and activity based where we can just pull our kids into the things that we enjoy and it creates time. It's like you're manufacturing time when you do that because it's like you're getting kid time and you're also getting wife bonus points for taking the kids out of her hair for half an hour and go throwing some football, So there are some things we can do.
A memory. You did, dude. I remember because at one point when I worked for GE, it was I was flying, maybe not every single week, but it was a lot. I was on a big project kind of thing, and both girls were young. I remember getting home, and Audrey was like, "Tag, here, you're it," and she's gone. And you know what? Rightfully so. But man, did I overdo it back then. We had a wake up call. And, back to the way you were putting earlier on the podcast saying, if you all of a sudden come down with some life-threatening disease, guess what you're going to spend time doing? So avoiding a crisis, if you can do it and you are open-minded enough and honest with yourself enough, ask the right questions, maybe get some folks in your life who are on that same page. Maybe they're even struggling with it like you. And I'm not saying you got to go scour the earth to try to find 4 dudes to get in your life that have all the answers. That ain't going to happen. But people that want the best for you, that understand you, that you can be honest with, and get that stuff out in the open. That's how you start.
Oh yeah, awareness is half the battle, right? I mean, just being able to say, man, I don't know if I'm managing my calendar correctly is a huge issue. Here's the other thing that I found as my kids got a bit older and they started to develop some of their own interests and hobbies. I would just lean into their hobbies. And sometimes that was just like listening only. In other words, my oldest son's a really good guitar player today. He showed a lot of promise early, and I was happy to let him sit down in our basement and play hours of guitar. Good way to burn all that energy when he's 14 and 16 and he wasn't on the internet, trolling bad images. So I'm like, hey, go practice guitar. But I spent more time listening to him describe guitars to me, fretboards, action, pickups, and music theory that I still don't totally understand, but I was leaning into his hobby. And trying to relate to him and just rolling around in like conversations about things that he knew a lot about that I didn't know about. And I used him as my teacher. And I found it was actually kind of interesting. I still can't play guitar. I really don't have any interest in playing guitar, but it was a great way for us to connect over something that he loved. And I didn't sit there pining away how I wish I were out playing golf. Like I thoroughly enjoyed it.
And that's the priority, is them. Yeah, you're gonna have to pull back on golf or bicycling or video game, whatever it is, and place them above you. I can't tell you how many hours of sitting watching singing or gymnastics. Oh, and by the way, at least guitar, you have a little bit like, maybe you could participate, or in your case, football or baseball or whatever. Dance.
Oh, come
ballet.
on, man. You'd be an awesome dancer. You have
dance. This is different. You got to understand, this is a little bit different, Ken. You haven't been.
I'm actually just picturing you in like a ballet outfit, and I'm not liking
Why
what
would
I'm
you
seeing.
Do that?
Yeah,
Why
I know that's a huge mistake.
Or swim meets. What is it? You don't even know which kid is yours, right? You could just kind of see a little head bobbing.
The first time we were going to one of our kids' swim meets, and it's a neighborhood, not a all year long thing, but like an 8-weeker. And somebody said, "Hey, bring a flashlight." And I thought, bring a flashlight? It's like 5:00, and it's the sun stays up till 9:30, and they go,
I've never heard that.
Bring a flashlight. I'm like, all right. Well, there it is, 11:30, midnight. The swim meet's ending, and there's 600 kids going, "Where are my goggles? I can't find my towel." And you're like, I wish I'd brought a flashlight. Like,
dude, I don't miss swim meets a bit.
I loved it, but buddy, man, whoo, yeah. But you know what? Even that, we would end up in a circle with parents.
In those cases, I couldn't participate. I'm looking from a distance. You see gymnastics, you see them dancing. But I'm present. You're there. They know you're there. You talk on the way there and on the way back.
Yeah. You know what I did one time? I did participate in a swim meet, but they threw me out. I don't know why. It was maybe I wasn't supposed to get in the pool.
Is he doing that again? God, get that guy out of here.
What is Evans doing? Actually, it's funny. One time it was so hot, like it's 105 plus or whatever. At halftime, they do the break in the middle. They go, "Hey, parents, we don't normally do this, but if you want to jump in the pool real quick, feel free." And we did. Like there was like 50 of us.
That's great.
Jumped in the pool, and I was like so grateful. Let me do this, Lawson, as we kind of land the plane a little bit on this idea of time. What I want to acknowledge for the dads listening, if you're a dad listening to this and you feel trapped by time, I want you to take heart. And I want you to, even though I'm a little bit the tin man, I may come across like I don't care. I really do care. I just want you to know that you have perhaps more control over time than you think you do. It just may take some intentional work. It may take some thinking. You might be on a volunteer committee at your church, and for a season you go, you know what, man, I do want to volunteer at church, but there's also another guy on this committee who really needs to step into the leadership of this committee. And I'm going to vacate my seat so he can step up. And I'm just going to spend this time with my kids. And I'm not saying don't go volunteer at church. Don't hear me wrong. What I am saying is there may be pockets where you can find 5 and 10 and 30 minutes here and there. I love how Steve Farrar shared it in the book Point Man, which, it's 2021 when we're recording this episode. And that book came out probably in the 80s, maybe mid to late 80s. I forget. It's been around a long time. And at the time he wrote it, there was this thing in American culture about the notion of quality time. And I love how he positioned quality time in the book. He goes, you can't create quality time on purpose. You don't know when time with your family is going to morph into quality time. The only way you can find quality time is create as much quantity time as you possibly can. And then accidentally, in the midst of that quantity time, there will be moments of quality. And I remembered that very clearly from the book Point Man by Steve Farrar. If you haven't read it, Dad, go read it. It's a great book.
Yeah, it's really good.
It's really good. And it's just this idea that we could take them to the grocery. So if I'm running an errand, the other night I had to go run an errand and I just grabbed one of my kids. I said, hey, come with me. We didn't do anything. We didn't talk about anything deep or spiritual, but I created a 30-minute moment where I took my 6-year-old to the grocery store, and we get out of the grocery store and he'd just gotten glasses and we were walking in the parking lot and he goes, Dad, stop, look.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
And I said, what? And he goes, when I'm walking, it's like I'm walking up a mountain. And it was just because he was looking down and like his new glasses, he'd just gotten glasses. It made the concrete move
that's
weird.
That's fantastic.
That was a moment.
Right.
That was a 10-second moment.
Totally. Yeah.
That I couldn't have created if I hadn't read the book Point Man 20 years ago and just decided to grab my kid on the way to the grocery store. So what's a closing idea, Lawson, you would say
so here's what I've been writing as we've been talking. It is there. You got to make an intentional effort to make time. It exists. You can do it. Get honest feedback before you start. Have some people, check you out, talk into your life, and then adjust, gauge, readjust, gauge, adjust. It is not an overnight thing. And then the last thing I would just say is just pray about it. God's going to lead you to how to prioritize what's most important. How is he going to be a part of your family in a new and better way? So that's what I wrote down.
Good word, brother. Hope this has been encouraging to you guys. We'll see you on the next episode. God bless. Hey, Dad, thank you for listening to today's show. If you found this episode helpful, remember, you can get all the content and show notes at manhoodjourney.org/podcast. And if you really liked it, please consider doing 3 things. Number 1, share this podcast with someone. You can hit the share button in your app, wherever you listen to podcasts, or just call a person up and tell them to listen in. Number 2, subscribe to this podcast so you get episodes automatically. That helps us as well to help dads find the show. You can do that through your favorite listening app, whatever that is. And finally, review this podcast. Leave us a review, good or bad, wherever you listen. Those reviews also help other dads find the show. You can always learn more about what we're up to at manhoodjourney.org or fatheronpurpose.org. We will see you next week.